That was creepier than I expected it to be. That was cool. I'm definitely keeping that as
good.
That almost sounds cooler than it is normally.
That was creepy.
Okay. Hello. You're listening to Midnight Movie Gang. It is currently 9:14 p.m. Night Movie Gang, or 41.9 MP.
Yeah.
Night Movie Gang. We're going to stop.
We're not going to do that very much more.
Sorry, folks. For those of you, if this is your first episode, or your last episode, goddamn. This is a show where we talk about mainly horror, sci-fi films, genre film. We talk about martial arts films every now and again, but just kind of the intellectual, what is considered not dramas, not just weird shit. This movie,
just entertaining popcorn movies.
This movie is weird shit. It's weird, and it's big, and it's interesting. Beyond the movie itself, I also think that like the way this movie is released and like some like the background stuff, this movie is interesting. I think we're gonna have a lot to discuss about it. Today we are talking about Christopher Nolan's Tenet, released in 2021, the only movie that had like a regular theatrical release, in 2020, not 2021.
Yeah.
So I'm here with Joseph. Hi, Joseph.
Hello. Tenet. Ole.
What?
Hello backwards.
Ole. I thought you were saying like that's not Tenet. Tenet is Tenet backwards.
Yeah, you know what Tenet backwards is? Who knows? Nobody knows.
Tenet. It's all about them palindromes. Everything's got to be a palindrome.
Yep.
So yeah, today we're talking about Christopher Nolan's Tenet, 2020. Joseph, I want to ask you, what is your history with this movie? So this is your second time watching it.
Yeah.
We watched it for the first time a few months ago. Just we had like a random Nolan watching Interstellar, and then this back to back. Before that time, in between seeing that, like, what's your history with this movie, Christopher Nolan? Hit me with it.
I grew up. I think I like Chris Nolan about as much as the next person. Like, I saw The Prestige as a boy. I saw all three of the Batman movies rocked my world for a while. I didn't see Inception until I was a grown-ass man.
Every stage in a young man's life. Christopher Nolan's a very dude director. I continue.
He is. Dudes love him. And I didn't see Tenet or Interstellar until you showed me. And I still feel like I haven't seen it because I still have no idea what happened in this movie.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm looking at this line here at the bottom of the Wikipedia opening. Said the film divided critics.
Yeah,
but
I kind of get it.
It won best VFX at the 93rd Academy Awards. I didn't know that it won an Oscar.
I believe it. It's very impressive.
Yeah. Also, as far as like movies that came out that year, like I don't even remember what the lineup looked like at that point. But
nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, my history with Christopher Nolan's pretty damn similar. Like, grew up on the Dark Knight movies, grew up loving those.
Everybody did.
I wasn't huge on Inception the first time. I appreciate a lot about Inception, but I
honestly think Inception is fine. Yeah,
it's lower on my list. Like I think my favorite Christopher Nolan movie overall, like 100%, is probably still Interstellar.
Yeah, for me it's Interstellar or The Dark Knight. I'm not really, honestly, I'm just not a big fan of his.
It's really just those two movies.
Yeah, kind of. Like this was okay, and so is Inception. I like a lot of the stuff that he puts in his movies, but I think just in general his style is like a little too like buttoned down for me.
Interesting, like a little bit too like clean industrial.
A little bit, yeah.
Because I remember watching Interstellar, we loved things like something.
I do like Interstellar a lot.
Yeah, the block robots, the fridge bots.
Yeah. Utilitarian.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's a very like he makes movies that feel very like high-minded and like art filmy, but they're like at their heart they're like big crowd-pleasing blockbusters that just like have a British accent.
Pretty much. Like I've heard people compare like legitimately, and like I understand this. like compare him. He's basically a British Michael Bay.
Yes,
And that like
exactly
he gets
classes it up, but he does the same shit.
Like the best parts about Tenet and like the best parts about like outside of Interstellar are like I love the way he does like action and set pieces, and his commitment to making things feel kind of like as grounded as possible, in the sense that like I feel like most of the visual effects in his movies feel I think the thing that is great about kind of like his movies and his vision of science fiction concepts in general, whether or not we're going into dreams or time or space, is that there is a lot of thought put into like what, in this movie it's debatable, but like what would things really look like? How would we perceive things? Like Interstellar, I can imagine going through a wormhole being like that.
His sense of spectacle being like something you can actually see and something that makes sense, just as like an anomaly that you're witnessing. Like it doesn't look like a movie. The camera's not spinning around going crazy. I do like that aesthetic a lot, and that also speaks to that car chase we were talking about in The Dark Knight with like all that practical stuff. Like it really does go a long way. There's a reason that shootout at the end of Django Unchained is like my favorite scene in any movie. There's no CGI in that scene at all, except for like a wire or two. It's just all squibs.
I also think another thing that Christopher Nolan does really well, I think he's really good, not necessarily with the sound editing, but like the kind of the sounds he uses. The sound editing, like how he decides to play certain sounds and like certain like earworms and stuff, like how he decides to mix the score kind of like in with the Foley.
This score is great, by the way.
Yeah, in Tenet, it's fucking awesome. I
listened to the score well before I even like thought about actually seeing this movie. Because I'd always heard it was just okay. So I'm glad I've seen it at this point. I'm glad you showed me. But before I saw it, I always assumed I wasn't going to like it.
Just like based off of people just going like
just
it's
general word of mouth.
It's more mid. Yeah, it sounds to me like just for listening to hear you talk about it, sounds to me like you are still, and it makes sense as far as like I've liked this movie more and more. I kind of hated this movie the first time I saw it.
I get it. Yeah.
I did
not hate it. This is my second viewing, I will say. I did not hate it. I think there's really good parts and really bad parts, and it all evens out to being fine.
That's fair. Every time I feel like I've watched this movie, I've equally found more things that I appreciate about it.
Yeah.
And more things that and more things that bother me or things that make less sense.
Yeah.
It's like every time I learn more, I don't understand just as much.
It feels like when you're a little kid and you're watching a movie and you just can't follow the plot because it's like made for adults. That's what it feels like, except I am an adult. And listen, I'll be the first to admit, I was diagnosed with ADHD. I have a really hard time following plots sometimes, so maybe this movie is just poison for my brain. Because this is the hardest example of following a plot I think I've ever encountered. I just have a really hard time understanding what the hell is going on at any point and what anyone's talking about.
I feel like his movie. This movie is definitely the most extreme, especially of the most guilty of this with his movies in terms of
like Inception. I understood the whole time, and I had no problem understanding because he explained that very well, like visually. But this movie, the visuals confuse me more. Like the exposition confuses me more. Everything just makes me further from my like a sense of understanding of what's going on.
I think a lot of it is the fact that what's it called? A lot of it just has to do with the subject matter here. Like his explanation of, for example, looking at Inception, his explanation for how dreams work, and like the levels and like all this, the rules of the universe, in Inception are, in my opinion, equally as like explained as they are in Tenet. But I think that like
Tenet's a way harder concept to explain.
I think the idea of someone going into someone's dreams and stealing information is an easier thing to imagine.
I think exactly. I think that this concept might have been a little too ambitious for a singular movie. Like maybe even like a TV show to like fully get
Yeah.
the audience to understand it.
Like a mini series or something.
Yeah, because this like, and honestly, a lot of people have made the point that the movie's almost trying to get you to stop even trying to understand it. Because honestly, like that lady says, just go with it. It's instinct. Like don't even like if you don't understand it, that's fine. It's still you're still gonna have a good time.
You know what that thing you just said made me think of as far as like have you ever heard of the TV show Dark? It's called Dark.
I think so.
It's on Netflix. It's for people at home. And I want to say this in general to the people at home. We're gonna be talking about full spoilers about everything in this movie. I don't think this movie is really spoilerable.
Yeah, you could tell me shit that I saw in the movie, and I'd be like, "What, really?"
Yeah, because like this is far.
Dude, it's Tenet. Time moves forward and backwards. You could spoil it in reverse too, because you still don't fucking know what happens in the movie after you've seen it.
Exactly, like it's the most unspoilable movie. And as far as but no, so it's running this TV show. It's called Dark, and it's a German show. It's been called Stranger Things, but time travel.
Okay.
As far as like it is about this small town and this cast of characters, and there is a very complex. The time travel in that show is, I think, like as kind of complex as they're presenting it in Tenet.
Yeah.
But the show has like 2 or 3 seasons.
Yes.
And it's like 8 episodes.
To get the audience on board.
And it really like, and I watched the show twice. I watched it with my mom and I watched it with my buddy Mitch. And it really eases you into it.
Yeah.
Like by the end of season 1, you think you've got everything figured out with the time travel shit.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and they throw something.
Just amp it up. It's like a video game. You have to progress the difficulty in stages, and they kind of try to do that in this.
Yeah, I feel like this movie has.
But it also like relishes in just being a mindfuck. Like the movie, the whole time is perfectly self-aware that none of this shit makes any sense.
I feel like
it references that.
I feel like there are 3 very distinct kind of like, I don't call them acts, like the chunks of this movie where we kind of get to the next level of which, but we haven't even explained what the fucking thing of this movie is.
I don't think I can. You take the wheel on that one.
Well, all it is like in this movie, the gimmick, the concept that Christopher Nolan is like playing with is like the mechanism of like making these set pieces, and the quote unquote story is there are
James Bond with time travel.
James Bond with time travel. There are people and objects that
there's a machine that can make things instead of moving forward in time,
they
move
backwards. So like
at the normal rate of speed.
Yeah, humans and people. If you went through this thing and you walked out, everything around you would appear as though it's moving backwards, but that is not the case. You are moving backwards.
Yes.
And it's in other people looking at you see you move backwards, and
that's pretty much the whole concept.
Yeah.
And the more you think about it, the less sense it makes.
Yeah, and I feel like there is a thing of like there are a lot of things that do not make sense as far as like
the bullet thing. I'm still stuck on
the bullet thing, and just in general, the bullet thing isn't the only thing. It's the bullet thing is the same problem we have with understanding how interactions work in this world between inverted objects and people and forward moving objects and people.
So for example,
there's 3 distinct examples in this movie I can think of that are like big ones, but go on.
Yeah. Well, when scientist lady is first explaining the concept of the movie to the protagonist, which is his name, by the way.
Yeah.
She uses a gun with like a piece of plaster at the end of a shooting range, and she tells the protagonist to shoot at the plaster, and there's no bullets in the gun. So when he pulls the trigger, a bullet flies from the plaster into his gun. So that's an inverted bullet. So she takes that bullet out of the gun because now it's back in its casing, and puts it next to a bullet that's moving at normal time to explain. And you can hold your hand over the inverted one, and it'll fly up into your hand at some time then you will it to do that, which also doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, she basically said as far as like he tried to just hold it over his hand and try to pick it up like the force, and it didn't do anything. And she's like, you have to have just dropped it.
But that doesn't make any sense. That would require people to have like psychic ability to see into the future.
Well, I mean, it's
instinct is what she says. Don't think about it too hard.
I think it's a thing as far as like and they kind of say at the end of the movie, the rules of this universe are that
There's gonna be a lot of this episode.
Yeah, yes, it is that this is. It seems like, from what we can see in this movie, is that like everything that is going to happen has already happened, in the sense that like everything is fixed.
Yeah.
All choices are fixed, and the only thing you can really do is like participate in it. Like
time is it's like the
It-
Einstein concept of like time is all happening at once, and we just perceive it one way.
Exactly. And in this movie, the protagonist like actively,
And it just this reverses something's entropy essentially.
yeah,
It's just like a property of that thing. It's just its entropy is reversed.
exactly.
Somehow.
Future and like it's a thing where it's like cause and effect. When we go forward, cause happens before effect. All that the inversion does is make the effect happen before the cause, and that isn't just with actions; it's also with intentions. Like him picking up the bullet, like from the bullet's perspective, his intention is reversed. I intend to drop this thing or pick up this thing so it pops back up.
And this might turn into an argument about free will, because I don't think a bullet gives a shit about what your intention was. I drop shit all the time without meaning to. Why does it matter what I meant to do and what I don't mean to do?
And this is what Chris,
Like I don't determine what happens in the future. Like I don't that is thing A that makes zero sense to me. But I haven't even gotten to the main reason I even brought up the bullets. The main antagonist is someone who's trafficking inverted bullets, right? Mm-hmm. How do you traffic inverted bullets when they fly out of things you've already shot them into?
You can't shoot inverted bullets. You can only catch You can only supposedly find them in the wild.
I would like anyone to explain that to me, please, because that makes zero. Like we've seen inverted bullets, and the only way to get them is to shoot something that's already been shot. And by the way, it leaves a bullet hole, right? That apparently is gone in like a few hours. I don't understand how long the backwards effect of an inverted thing happening lasts.
It seems
that's and that's like a big part of all the action in this movie.
Yeah, that's a thing that like they kind of like they don't necessarily explain, but something that I think it is a
lot
rule
of what I could focus on.
I think it's a rule in this universe that needs to the movie does not properly explain. I think there are lines that kind of like hint at like what it means, like because what it's explained as is like inversion is you get hit with inverted radiation and that causes you to invert.
Sure.
Like it is like a ray, like an energy field or whatever that is inverting you.
Yeah.
And
radiation being just like a general catch-all sciencey thing.
And there's
official.
There's a character in this movie that gets shot with an inverted bullet while she's moving forward, and she has an inverted bullet wound.
We had to like rewind it like 3 times.
We did
to fucking understand this part.
That whole scene, yeah. Well, this
is my problem with this movie.
That's the middle of the movie. That's where the movie takes us a very specific kind of.
On one hand, the movie is it's interesting because it's so. I like the idea of a movie that's so weirdly complicated. It's encouraging the audience to turn its brain off and just watch it and go with it. But my brain gets really frustrated with that because I'm for me, like I'll miss like in like a regular normal like good movie, I'll miss important plot points because I'm too focused on some individual detail, and I realize I've been thinking about that for the past like 2 minutes of this scene and missed all that dialogue. Yeah, and it happens to me in real life too.
That was kind of me with the Batman the other day when I rewatched the Batman. There were certain things like I was thinking about one scene that happened, and I had to go back like, fuck, wait, I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, so this movie is like fucking kryptonite for me because I'll miss like whole other concepts that are that they're attempting to explain, just trying to understand the last one. It makes me feel really stupid.
No, I mean, I think that's, you know what, honestly, Joseph, this may sound redundant, but I think that's what Christopher Nolan wants you to feel.
I think so.
I think Christopher Nolan,
because like the protagonist feels stupid.
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, and that's something that I think is beneficial. Like once that middle, so basically the first time that we go into inverted world, like I think this movie kind of pretty much is cut in half from that point, as far as like the first half of this movie is really just a focus on like the protagonist is trying to figure out, like for the most part, this is very broadly. he's just trying to figure out where these inverted objects are coming from.
Yeah.
Is kind of the first half of this movie. And then there's a point where he has to go
He's sailing.
He's sailing. He goes sailing with the Russian
oligarch.
oligarch.
Fun time with the antagonist for a little bit.
After the Russian oligarch, what's his fucking
even stuff that just happens
Satyr.
in the plot doesn't make any sense
Yeah.
to me. Like why is the bad guy like inviting you to go recreational sail with him before discussing business?
It's some James Bond shit, which I mean that's another thing I think we have to. That is like an essential thing about this movie is that like. And this is something you can see across all of Christopher Nolan's movie. He's said multiple times that he's a huge James Bond fan. Like those movies were a huge inspiration on him.
White dudes in suits.
Yeah. On Her Majesty's Secret Service in particular, which is like a very specific Bond movie that like pretty much like all of the set pieces in Inception are references to set pieces in that movie.
Yeah.
This movie straight up is like his like pitch for like his Bond.
Fine, I'll make one myself.
but it's got to be weird.
But it's gonna have like a weird sci-fi thing in it.
Yeah.
Imagine like an established character, but there's this.
Would this have worked better or worse if this was like James Bond's Tenet? would that be where if it was
been dumber?
If it was literally like James Bond like encounters like a Tenet agent and gets like involved in the world of Tenet.
Yeah, that would be cool. I've never seen a Bond movie though. So make that perfectly clear to everybody.
Yeah. You get the idea of like
I'm a fake movie fan.
You've seen like spy movie. Every spy movie is just like a knockoff of.
I think I'm just not a fan of spy movies. Atomic Blonde, love the action scenes, hate the rest of it.
Yeah.
bored as fuck for the rest of the time.
We'll watch some Bond. We should watch some Bond movies. Probably not necessarily for the show, but just like there are. Like I said, there are a handful of great. The Spy Who Loved Me. Greatest James Bond movie of all time.
Nice.
It opens up with like Bond. He's in like a log cabin somewhere, and he's getting a phone call, and he's having sex with a woman, and he reaches down to his shoe on the floor, like he's like in bed, reaching down the shoe on the floor, and then the shoe like folds out into a phone, and he's like, "I'm busy."
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's something that is like heavily. That is kind of like the style in view at the very least of the first half of this movie, like the first, and then when that flip happens where the protagonist has to go into inverted world or whatever, the movie kind of becomes like, I don't know, it goes off the rails. I guess it kind of switches from him trying to figure out what's going on to them trying to stop Satyr's evil plan, which his evil plan, pretty like the bad guy Satyr, who's like the Russian oligarch guy, for the most part is he's dying of cancer, and he's such a
the world with him.
He's such a salty bastard that he basically wants to assemble an inversion bomb, which is these 9 metal pieces of the Dragon Ball.
It makes his big drive shaft
to invert the world, which would destroy the world.
Yeah, it would be like matter and antimatter.
Yeah, it basically the whole thing, because
cease to exist.
The best way that Robert Pattinson explains it in the movie is he talks about like time being a river, right?
Yeah.
And like overwhelmingly most things are flowing in one direction. Some things that are inverted would be like a fish trying to swim against stream is like an inverted thing. Right?
Yes.
But the river overwhelmingly goes one way. This device would like stop and flip the river.
The first time I watched this movie, my understanding was there are like 2 timelines that are like constantly moving past each other.
No.
And so like I understood it even less the first time, but I still don't really feel like I understand it anymore.
Yeah, basically, Satyr wants to destroy the world because he's salty, and the second half of this movie is about the protagonist trying to stop that.
Yeah, but here's thing number 3 that bugs me. The antagonist goes back pretty far in the past to try to end the world. Like that's the point that he chooses to do it at. Mm-hmm. Is like on vacation on this yacht
with his wife.
But we've made it past that point as a society.
6'2" Elizabeth Debicki.
His giant wife.
Yeah.
his supermodel wife, who's taller than him and the protagonist.
Yeah, that was the thing that made this look at it, because there was a scene where her and the protagonist are just like sitting at.
Like, is she like a foot taller than him?
She looks. He looks like a little kid in that shot, and I'm like, how fucking tall is she?
And then we Googled it, and then we're like, oh, okay.
Because he's 5'11", he's like normal dude height.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
But yeah. Here's the thing that doesn't make any sense to me. He goes back in time to end the world, to end reality, but we already know he doesn't do that because time did not end at that point. Like, am I off base in that? Like, we already know that he failed, so why even try to stop him? Like, we already know.
Well, what they say in the movie, or at least what Robert Pattinson says in the movie, is that they don't know for sure if there are alternate timelines, or if, like, he basically at the end of the movie they basically sum it up as like, hey, just because we don't know what's gonna happen or like what it is doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. Is ultimately, which is kind of stupid, dude, but that's what it's saying.
So that's the thing, dude. Any movie that has multiple realities like that, I immediately don't give a fuck about the plot, because there's like a billion realities. There's infinite realities where they succeed and infinite realities where they fail. Yeah, like, so they might as well have already failed.
I think it's a thing where I think this movie is very distinctly trying to set up a world. The more I'm thinking about it, it is very distinctly trying to set up a world where, like, there is no possibility of a grandfather paradox, in the sense that, like,
they break that like multiple times.
In the sense that, like, hear me out. So the whole thing with the grandfather paradox, so, like, anybody who's seen any sci-fi movie knows what it is. As far as, like, you go back in time, kill your grandpa before your parents are conceived. How are you going to go back in time and do it?
Exactly.
So they
reference that in the movie.
They talk about
which just brings up so many issues.
They talk about it in the movies, and I remember there was this, like, science book I read as a kid that talked about the grandfather paradox and said that basically there are three potential, like, solutions to the grandfather or like things that, like, make it okay. Yeah. Or whatever. The first one, which is the stupidest. Not the stupidest necessarily, but is that time travel is impossible. Yeah. So therefore it can happen. The second solution was the parallel realities thing, where, like, if you go and do something like that, it is going to just cause a parallel reality where both your grandfather is alive and isn't alive is a thing. And then the third thing, which I think is what Tenet is doing, is that if you try to go back in time and kill your grandfather, you won't be able to. If you try to shoot him with a gun, your gun's going to jam. Yeah. If you try to choke him, he'll overpower you. If you try to poison him, the poison won't work. Like, the reality in time and space is going to protect itself.
Well, it's like
is
like,
what
you know that it doesn't happen because it didn't happen, essentially. So
yeah. So
like,
why even try?
You know, well, it's not. Yeah, it's not so much like something like some force trying to protect the timeline. It's just like the timeline already exists front to back as is. So, like, you can't, like, exist outside of it and then go back and affect it. You exist in it no matter which direction you go. So, like,
you're right. This is what this episode is evolved into.
So, like, all of space and time already exists, and we just experience it linearly, right? Yeah. So you can't go back and change a part of it that wasn't already like that, because you exist here and you exist over here as well. Like, you exist all the way, all along the timeline already. Like,
if you got them, smoke them, folks.
Yeah. Does that make sense? Is what I'm saying make any sense?
It makes sense to me.
You can't go back and change time because it's already happened and it already will happen. Like, it's already, especially in this universe, everything's already predetermined. Yeah. So, like I said, if he hasn't already ended time, how, like, why even, like, you already know he fails. Why spend all these lives and shit?
Because you still have to do all the stuff to make it not happen.
Okay, so let's say, hypothetically, I just say, I don't care, I'm not going to do it. What happens?
That's not what happens. You do it. That's what the movie puts forward, is that, like, hey, like, he...
So if I'm going to do it either way, why even put forth the effort? If otherwise I'll just do it by accident. Who gives a shit?
That'd still be you.
What's the tension?
That would still be you doing it.
You already know they succeed.
Yeah, I mean that in and of itself deflates tension. They even say that in the movie, as far as, like, somebody says, I think, during the final scene, like, where basically the final set piece of this movie for people at home, which I guess we haven't even gone through. Like, let's talk about the plot. So, no, there's no fucking point.
We're already explaining the plot.
The final third of this movie, the final set piece, is like a big war scene in this like ruined city town.
Yeah.
Where there's like inverted armies. There's like two inverted armies and two regular armies all fighting across this battlefield. There's reverse explosions and forward explosions.
Yes,
and like all this.
It's very cool looking, and I don't have any idea what's going on.
It's very cool looking, but it's hard to explain. That was another thing. Was they blow up a building and reverse blow up a building.
Yeah, it's cool
like twice. It looks cool,
but it pisses me off because I start thinking about it and it drives me crazy.
Yeah,
like, was that building just a pile of rubble and then it was a building for 0.1 of a second, then it blew up again?
Yeah, but the whole thing about this ending, and the thing that like I'm kind of more realizing is that the whole reason that the Tenet organization exists, and the whole reason that like all of this inverted pincer move, like all this like coming
Yeah.
exists, is specifically for them to stop Sator's plan.
Yeah.
For him to not bury the algorithm underground.
Yeah.
To send to the future.
Yes.
That is the whole reason why the whole Tenet organization exists, and why the protagonist after this point goes and finds Tenet and recruits Neil and recruits Kick-Ass and recruits you know
it's a causality loop. It doesn't make any sense. And for like, I think that's also my problem is, like, one part of this movie wants me not to care about the nuts and bolts, but the other part is constantly fucking explaining the nuts and bolts and trying to adhere so tightly to its rules. So if something doesn't make sense, that's all I can think about. It's like, if it's like, this is such a tightly wound clock of a movie. So if any part of it is like a logical inconsistency, that sticks out so hard as like, if I can think of it, I know you thought of it. So like, if this is a problem for me, it should probably be explained in the movie. That's my problem.
Yeah.
It's so hung up on explaining the inner workings of this mechanic, but it just fails. I think. Yeah. It fails. It can, because I think it's just too hard of a concept to fit into a movie. It's like you need to be able to think fourth dimensionally.
Yeah. It's a whole thing. I don't know. I think I'm definitely like just on the line of like, I think my phases of grief with Tenet was like, the first time I just didn't like it, couldn't really follow it. The second time I watched it again, and like, I didn't understand more, but I guess I wasn't as mad at the movie. I guess it was more just like me appreciating, like more finding the things. Like, my second time through this was more me finding things like, oh, that mirror's busted and it's gonna reverse bust. Yeah. And like, oh, that's what that is, you know, and like
that stuff makes no sense to me either. But
connecting the little things. And then the third time, and then last time I watched it, it was more like I went in the vibe way and just like was just enjoying all this, because I think that like legitimately, as far as like the strongest elements of this movie are the set pieces and like the production design, like surrounding these set pieces.
Super impressive movie.
Yeah,
like,
and
from like a technical point, and the action is great.
I think Christopher Nolan has always been like he's always been just the tightest technical director.
Yeah, and I think like, because this is Nolan going like full on like, I'm just making a fun action movie. So he's like, I like this concept where like we can film stuff in reverse and like it's happening at the same time as stuff moving forward. I think that's a cool action concept. Now I need to come up with this
a story.
Yeah, this entire mechanic that like is like gonna now like it bloats up because it's such a complex thing to being the core focus of the movie. Of like not just what's happening but how it's happening. And you know, I think there's something to be said for it telling you just like, listen, I know that this is impossible to follow.
Yeah.
We don't understand it either.
Just roll with it.
Just roll with it.
And yeah, the movie very directly tells the audience to do so.
Yes.
And most of the people I've talked to, and also people like reviews of this movie that I've seen, like a lot of the people who end up enjoying it the most are ones who like saw that scene and very much took it to heart.
Yeah.
Is like, yeah, like after that scene, the movie kind of gave me permission to feel it. You know,
I guess.
As far as like, yeah, which I don't know. Like I said, isn't necessarily like.
To me, that's like it's a little frustrating because like the plot is also kind of difficult to follow. Like not just like the technical stuff. I think the technical stuff muddies the waters for the plot. Like it makes the plot harder to follow because you're too focused, or at least I'm too focused on the technical aspects. But the plot is also so it's like, am I supposed to not care about the mechanics but follow the plot? But the plot is so hinged upon the mechanics.
When you say the plot, as far as like what I'm thinking of when I think of something that I do think is a failure of this movie is that weird. This is gonna sound so strange. I think the performances in this movie are strong. Yeah. As far as like I think that even John Dan Washington, as far as like what he's selling is confused man.
Yes.
Who cares about this? Like his whole motivation, his whole through line is that he cares about this woman. He cares about Elizabeth Debicki's character and like getting her or something. Like he like that's his whether or not it's like romantic or whatever. Like that is the thing that is pushing him forward through this world.
Kinda, yeah.
But like we don't really get any detail about exactly what kind of how abusive the relationship between her and Seder is, or like even what her relationship with her son is. Even the whole crux of like what he has over her isn't explained well, as far as like, oh, it's a painting or a fake painting or whatever.
He's like blackmailing her or something.
Like the elements of the plot, removing the time shit, the time sci-fi is not explained well, and also honestly uninteresting.
Yeah, exactly. That's my problem. Is like this movie is. Like, if you want your movie to be pure vibes, maybe don't like throw so much bullshit at the audience like that you're making me overthink. Yeah. Like, you know, you can make a vibes movie. It's just like also like if you don't want me to understand what's going on, stop trying to explain it. Because that's another thing about this movie is it won't shut the fuck up. There's a part at the end when Robert Pattinson is like saying goodbye to the protagonist. And he turns and talks literally like 6 times as he's walking away. Yeah, it's true. He's just saying more and more confusing shit. Like while I'm still trying to think of the last thing that he said, like trying to make that make sense. Like one thing, I think he says like, "You have a future in the past," and I'm like trying to fucking unpack that, but like, and boom, they're on to the next part.
That line earlier, Tenet was founded in the future.
Yeah, was founded in the future. Can you please say is going to be founded in the future? Just to make me like less frustrated.
But it already happened, man.
It hasn't. It will. That's how time works.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating.
Yeah. No, this whole movie is definitely kind of built on that, as far as like we've mentioned it already. I think for me, okay, I will say this. For me personally, I think the main area where I think it fails like mechanically the most in the movie is when like, and we touched on it earlier, but the whole how inverted and forward moving objects and people when they like interact, and like when someone gets reverse stabbed or when someone gets hit with a reverse bullet in this movie, the whole thing is like these injuries, technically speaking, we see.
This is like half of what I was talking about during this movie too.
Exactly.
This is like this was the thing that was like that I was super focused on. Yeah.
The reason I want to bring it up is because I think that these things, or even like the mirror being being reverse destroyed or whatever, like all of these things of like how these objects physically interact with each other from inverted and forward moving objects and people.
It's never clarified.
It's never clarified in a way that lets you go forward in the movie. It is meant, the reason
constantly questioning it.
I think the reason why I might have an easier time with it, as far as like it's something I accept, is that in the movie, Pattinson, they don't say why it works, but Pattinson says the sci-fi bullet bullshit of if like when she gets shot or whatever,
it's radiation, right?
It's like radiation. If we invert her twice, then that'll fix it. Like, it's the only way to do it.
By the way, radiation is just particles moving really fast. I don't understand how that could reverse your entropy.
It's time travel radiation.
It's not
Joseph.
like quantum physics radiation. It's just particles.
It's the tachyons, man.
It's just stuff breaking down and throwing off particles really, really hard and fast.
Yeah.
But whatever. It's like it's the sci-fi word for the movie.
But yeah, basically, there's that brief scene where they basically, he doesn't say why it works or like why it works that way, or even just as far as like, they say something along the lines of like, oh yeah, it wears off, or like
see, and that doesn't make any sense to me either.
Well, as far as like, it doesn't make. Here's the thing.
It's like
that doesn't make any sense to me in the same way that like. You know how, like, on Star Trek, they never have explained how the gravity on the ships work?
Yeah.
And how, like, oh, yeah, there's the gravity generator.
Yeah, there's just
it generates gravity.
It's just a machine somewhere on the ship.
That type of thing is an easier pill for me to swallow than for the causality. Because
it also feels like it feels inconsistent. 'Cause I don't know why they committed to things popping up in, like, such like varying amounts of time rather than just like it wouldn't have made any more sense, but I would have preferred it if they were just like, yeah, this window has just always had a break in it, or your arm has had like a wound in it for the past like 2 months that it has like it's like had sutures in it, no idea where it came from, and then all of a sudden
it just appeared one day.
It reverse heals at the same rate that something would heal because it's a reverse stab, an inverted stab. That would have made more sense to just like then like, oh, it pops up like 5 minutes before you get stabbed, like you start bleeding. It's like, why is it heal so fast in reverse? That doesn't make any sense. There's no consistency to like and like, do these bullet holes just heal somehow? Do like does that exploded building we were talking about, does the rubble slowly like float back up and get put back together for some reason,
like over time?
Because if that happens, we don't see it at any point in the movie anything like that. It's that's like a small detail, but it so many things in the movie would be affected by that.
I mean, pretty much like every time we see interactions, that's like that is pretty much the core kind of mechanic of it. And like, I don't know, the excuse I have in my head, and as far as like what I was able to interpret from the movie, is just like, yeah, it wears off.
Yeah, I guess. I guess.
And that's, I don't know, that's kind of where I take it. As far as I want to talk about, do you think if this movie had come out during the not pandemic, like if Nolan had decided to just like delay the actual release to like 2022 or like 23,
successful?
Well, yeah, like successful, or like, do you think that it would have? Because here's the thing, I think what's interesting about like how this movie was released is like when I saw this movie at the drive-ins, like when it came out at a drive-in movie theater, and I was the only person I knew who saw it. And I feel like at that time there were just like pockets of people who like risked going to the theater or whatever.
All I ever heard was A, it's mid, and B, I didn't like, no one understood what it was even about even after seeing it.
And I just feel like since then, slowly more and more people I've seen like online, people making fucking YouTube video essays and shit of this movie coming up in the zeitgeist, and I think a lot of it was a big bump of it started with Oppenheimer. When Oppenheimer came out,
people were like, oh yeah, people didn't see his last one.
We should check that out before we go see Oppenheimer. And that's when I feel like a lot of the people started talking about the movie more. It's a movie I feel like I still see people kind of discussing. Like, do you think that it would have had a bigger impact?
It would have had a bigger impact for sure. I think people still would have been very frustrated with it. Because, like, you know, Inception came out and people were confused by it, and they were talking about how confused they were. I remember that.
It probably would have been a similar thing.
This movie would have just been like, it's incomprehensible. That would have been like the consensus you would have heard. I don't think it would have. I still don't think it would have turned a profit.
Yeah. How much money did it lose, out of curiosity? This says, I don't know what the budget. Yeah, well, wow, it was an expensive movie. $205 million reported budget. 300
crazy.
I feel like you know what? Like I said, I like this movie more than you, but I feel like we've seen movies that look better with lower budget. The immediate thing I think of, ironically, with John David Washington being the creator, for $80 million, it looks like $300 million. That fucking movie.
Yeah, honestly, this movie's a lot less impressive now that I know that it cost $200 million.
Well, that's just I guess it's a thing where it's like Christopher Nolan.
I mean, it's all the practical stuff.
All the practical stuff, the fact that he's shooting like everything on film.
Creator is just really good visual effects, but that's relatively cheap in comparison to
most of the movie he's filming on IMAX. Funnily enough, with the IMAX, something that's interesting. This movie and Oppenheimer actually are the first. So IMAX cameras, a lot of the reverse shots in this movie, he literally just like, for them to get like the playback immediately with the IMAX cameras, they had to design IMAX cameras that shoot in reverse, that playback in reverse, because IMAX has never, their cameras, they've never had them do that way. So Christopher Nolan and his team and his like production team or whatever had to like go to IMAX and design.
They shot it in reverse. They couldn't just roll the film backwards.
Well, just as far as like IMAX film is like huge, takes up a lot of space, like as far as like being able to immediately look at the like, because what they need to do is they needed to be able to immediately look at the playback of the reverse footage to make sure that like it looks how he needs it to look.
They couldn't just have like a whatever. I don't understand. I think it's very clear I don't know what I'm talking about. But they couldn't just have a machine that plays it back in reverse. Was that not cheaper than a camera that shoots in reverse?
I guess not.
I guess not.
I think it's
I don't know anything about what I'm talking about.
It's a similar thing as far as like with Oppenheimer. There had never been black and white IMAX film before.
Yeah.
Have you seen Oppenheimer? I forgot.
Not yet. I'm planning on seeing it soon.
There's big sections of it in black and white, and they
shot it in black and white.
They shot it in black and white, and they had to invent black and white IMAX film because there has never been IMAX film.
Because they color corrected anyway. What the hell? It feels like you're just like trying to inflate the budget at that. Like you're just something to like talk about in interviews.
What I'm saying is
making extra work.
As far as like I think that's just the thing of like Christopher Nolan. I think Christopher Nolan is the only. I think he's the only like young-ish. He's not young anymore necessarily, but like not like a Spielberg or like an old director who can make original content.
He's hipster Michael Bay
for this much money.
Yeah,
right now, like in the sense that like
him and like Tarantino and like Scorsese.
Even Tarantino doesn't have budgets that are this big. Like Tarantino still keeps it.
Tarantino's budget, I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was pretty expensive.
Let me check that out. Let's fact check.
I would like to know the budget.
I
think it was pretty high.
Bring it up, Jamie.
I think it was. I mean, it's not an action movie like this.
90 million reported.
That's
smaller than
it's not that much, but it's not an action movie.
Yeah.
But you're right though. He's an action director, and those movies tend to be way more expensive. And I think the Batman movies gave him like license to kill essentially. Mm-hmm. So like people will see no matter what he makes because it's his name attached to it.
Yeah. Next thing I wanted to ask was like before we kind of like talked about the extension of a lot of things we wanted to talk about in the movie. Yeah. I wanted to ask you though, as far as like I wanted to pick your brain on something we always talk about in terms of a lot of these episodes is like, what would the video game version be like? But as far as like
I think the video game version of this movie would probably suck.
But the thing I wanted to ask though is like, do you think that there could potentially be room for more content in this universe, or like more in like something like a spin-off comic?
I think
or
a
like
miniseries would be interesting.
An Adult Swim miniseries from
something animated would be cool because you could do that a lot cheaper. Mm-hmm. There's a show on Adult Swim right now called Common Side Effects. Mm-hmm. That's just a drama that's being animated, and you can tell the budget would have been a lot higher if they'd have done anything live action. But it's really just like a human drama, like about like society at large. But you can do such large scale stuff.
Yeah.
I think animation you can do whatever. So I think like a comic or an animated show.
I think animated would actually be really good because
Tenet anime.
Well, not even necessarily anime. Something like I know everyone says this, but like even something like Spider-Verse style.
I think, and I also think exactly
something where they can get more. They can exaggerate more.
Yeah, and I think I think having more time to ease the audience into these concepts rather than that's another problem I have with this movie is the dialogue is it's so like lofty and like want to be poetic like a lot of it sounds very nice, but it's like purposely enigmatic and like super like no one actually just speaks in plain English except for like the protagonist. Like Robert Pattinson is like, "Do you have a headache yet?" He's like, "Yes."
Yes. Yeah, I think that I don't know. That's also something I didn't appreciate. Is I appreciated John David Washington a little bit more this time around because have you seen?
I like him.
Yeah, have you seen you know the Criterion Closet videos?
Yeah.
Where like they'll get like famous people to come in, look at him and his brother. I believe his name is Malcolm Washington. Had a Criterion Closet video recently, and it was really funny because his brother is very clearly more like the film bro who's like talking about like, oh yes, Godard, my favorite Ingrid Bergman film and stuff. And John David Washington's like, Jackie Chan. He goes with the Police for a Box Set, one of the greatest all time, Rumble in the Bronx. He's like, no, and every time his brother pulls up, like, oh, have you seen this movie? He's like, no, I haven't seen that.
No, I don't watch that shit.
I think that over something I kind of want to rewatch The Creator after watching this now because he very clearly does do most of his own stunts.
Yeah.
And like he's doing the fighting, and I think he's a really good like physical performer.
I'd like to see him as like
The Black James Bond.
I want to see him like I always talk about how we have no like movie stars now that like have like their like personalities. Like I guess we've got like a couple people like we've got like Willem Dafoe
Adam
and
Driver.
like Adam, but even like 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 the kind of movie star where it's like like you'll go to a movie because they're in it. I'd like to see him be one of those people.
Yeah.
Like I guess like Robert Pattinson's one of those right now, but
I feel like he's I don't know
like Anya Taylor-Joy and shit.
I don't always there. I feel like every project I've seen, which really I think I've only seen John David Washington in 3 movies: this, The Creator, and Black Klansman.
Yeah,
and
he's good in all of them.
He is good in all of them, but all 3 are movies that, of the 3, Tenet's probably my favorite, but all 3 I think are flawed projects.
Yes,
I don't know.
He hasn't found a super solid like crowd pleasing movie yet.
Yeah, all I can say is Marvel, please don't take him. Marvel, please leave that boy alone.
No, they'll take him.
Don't make him like the new Black Panther or whatever.
If he gets big, they'll take him even more sure. Like if he gets like a big hit, they'll take him.
Yeah,
they'll put him in a show or some shit.
John David Washington is Iron Man.
Iron Man again.
Yeah. But I was saying, I'm thinking about this whole animation thing. I think that you could explore some of the craziness of this universe in animation in a way you couldn't do in like something like the Animatrix.
Yeah.
I feel like where you can take like this
flux.
Yeah, this like live action sci-fi world and see what you can really do with exaggeration.
Exactly.
I think it'd be really cool. Something I'd like to see.
I think you could, like I said, I think you'd have more time. You could ease people into the concepts, and
I don't think we're ever gonna do so because Christopher Nolan doesn't make sequels to his shit. There ain't gonna be no Interstellar 2.
Nope.
There ain't gonna be no Inception 2.
The Prestige 2.
There ain't gonna be
so excited for the Prestige 2.
Tenet fucking -1 net 0 or whatever. Tenet 0. If they're gonna make a sequel, it's got to be Tenet 0.
Tenet, it would be like
Tune in.
Tenet -2. That's the dumb version.
Yeah. The one.
The one.
But yeah, overall, I guess if you want to summarize like your overall thoughts as far as like you like as far as like I feel like we're on farther ends of the spectrum on it than it is. I think every time I've watched this movie I've gotten more out of it. At the very least, like for as long, it's a pretty long movie, it's 2.5 hours. I think that it you don't have time to necessarily get bored.
Yeah, that's true.
I think as far as like it keeps moving, something interesting on screen, some conversation that you're thinking about is like always happening. Yeah. And I don't know, it's like every time it's managed to thoroughly keep me hooked. I think that there are a lot of problems with the mechanics of the movie, but I enjoy peeling back another piece of the onion every time I go see. And even if like the core is rotten,
I suppose that has value.
Like, I enjoy like pulling apart these facilities. Yeah. So what's your overall thoughts?
Yeah, I think this movie's like equal parts like fun and like insufferable at times. Like the general, like a lot of stuff is super fun and fun to watch and entertaining. Like it's a really cool action movie, but it wants to have this veneer of being like like this like super and I like the idea of it being like a James Bond like globetrotting adventure too, but everything everyone talks about, the way everyone talks, and the concepts of the movie all drive me fucking up a wall. I think that might just be Nolan though, but this is the best action I think in his. I mean, I like the Dark Knight. I like the Dark Knight's like vehicle chase more, but I think that this is a close second as far as the action in his whole catalog goes. I think this is his best action movie. But it, like I said, it's equal parts fun and very frustrating for me. So if I watch it with the sound off, I'll probably have a really good time.
I just thought of a good question to ask you about this movie.
Yeah.
You gave me the idea of it, just kind of talking about it now. If you could have a different director or creative team make Tenet.
Yeah.
A different director or creative team make Tenet, who would you want to see do it? I know exactly who I would pick.
Okay. I want Jendi Tartakovsky to do it.
Okay, that's a good choice. I know we mentioned the Matrix. I think the Wachowskis doing like a Netflix series, because like have you seen Sense8?
No.
So the Wachowskis like a Netflix series. I think that like it has like a kind of a broad sci-fi concept that they take the time to ease you into and you know the characters, and like I feel like the Wachowskis could do. Yeah,
this is a very Wachowski idea.
I feel like I think the Wachowskis would do this, but have characters that you care about.
Yeah.
I think ultimately is like what it comes down to is like I think they're good at putting people that you like and characters that you care about in weird sci-fi situations,
right.
Which I think would help this movie a lot.
That would be cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is just this movie's trying to be a fun action Bond movie and also a super super heady sci-fi movie, and I just don't think the two blend very well.
Yeah. Is Blossom still?
She's right there. She's laying down behind you.
But yeah, last item. Props. What prop do you want from the movie?
Damn. Yeah, that's another thing. These movies are so like it's based in just reality that there's nothing all that fun. I guess there's like the time bomb or whatever it is.
The time bomb at the end, the algorithm.
That's cool and all.
What'd you say it looked like? It looked like
it looked like a drive shaft.
A drive shaft in a car, yeah.
Or like whatever the engine piston thing. I don't know. I like the I'll take. There's a pipe bomb in the beginning, but since it's a Nolan movie and everything has to be sleek, it's spray painted black for no reason, and it has like a little timer on it. I'll take that. I thought that was kind of cool looking.
I really like the look of the watches at the end.
Yeah.
Which is another thing I
Those
appreciate.
Cool watches.
I appreciate whenever you see like the inversion machines or like kind of like they always signify like shit that's at the end of the movie. The army that's tagged red are going forward.
Yeah.
The army that's tagged blue is inverted.
We need any kind of visual aid that we can get.
Yeah. And I really like the look of the clocks, the watches they have at the end, where it's like it's just like a big like digital like blue watch and a big digital blue. I want a set of those.
Here's a question. You bombard a human being with. So why is the watch? Does the watch running backwards?
Well, it's just. I think each watch is just a countdown.
It's just okay. So it's literally just counting down.
Yeah, they're just counting down for each side. Like you have 10 minutes. You have 10 minutes to do your task, whether or not.
I thought that was the watch moving like forward in the inverted time. Whatever.
No, it's just like literally just telling each team.
Thing number 50, I was confused about in this movie.
Yeah, you just have 10 minutes to do your task. But yeah, no, that's Tenet.
What was your prop? Was the
my
watches?
Prop was I want a set of the watches. I want the red one and the blue one, and I could be like, whoa. And I'll have one of them going back. Oh, the blue one's going backwards
at all times. You're wearing like tiny sunglasses and a trench coat.
Exactly. Yeah, no, this is a movie. Let's see. I don't know if I'd even like. This is a movie I think if I was younger, I'd just be super confused about. It's not even
fucking my age, and I'm super confused about.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's Tenet. Is it streaming on anything? I want to see.
I don't know.
If it's free to stream on anything, then it's worth it. It's not. You have to rent it.
Damn.
I think it's worth a little rent.
Yeah.
With some
get so high that you're not even gonna try to follow it
and just roll into it. Yeah. You have been listening to Midnight Movie Gang. It is currently 10:13 p.m. Night Movie Gang. Thank you so much for listening again. You can follow us on YouTube at Midnight Movie Gang Podcast. on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, wherever you listen to audio, just at Midnight Movie Gang.
Yep.
Instagram, same thing, at Midnight Movie Gang. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.